From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers. Today we'll learn about an invasive plant newly identified in Wisconsin called Japanese Stiltgrass and learn how to prevent its spread.
The best way to prevent this impact is to identify it right when it establishes and get rid of it before it spreads. And so that's kind of why we've been trying to promote that people look for this plant.
Then we'll get a preview of this year's Milwaukee Short Film Festival, which is showing 75 films in 3 days.
That's most of what we get now, is Milwaukee filmmakers or Wisconsin filmmakers sending us stuff. And they luckily prefer our festival to be the first stop instead of the last stop now.
Plus, we'll share a love letter to local paleteros. All of that is coming up on Lake Effect. But first, here are today's headlines. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Joy Powers, and thank you so much for joining us. Earlier this summer, an invasive species called Japanese Stiltgrass was spotted in Rock County. Scientists are now asking the public to help prevent the invasive grass from spreading across the state. Mark Renz is a professor and an extension weed specialist at UW-Madison. He joins Lake Effect's Excret Nunez to share how to identify stiltgrass and what to do if you find it.
What's the recent status update on confirmed cases of the invasive species Japanese stiltgrass?
So we had an initial report in one property just east of Beloit. And since then, we've kind of created an alert and asked woodland and forestry owners and people that just frequent these areas to be on the lookout for this invasive annual grass called Japanese stiltgrass. We've gotten many reports. 2 of those have turned out to be positive reports of new infestations, one in the southwest part of the state and one in the southeast part of the state. So that's the bad news, but it's actually good news because these populations were only like 30 by 30 square feet. And so those property owners should be easily able to eradicate those populations before they spread further. And really, they were found before they really were causing any impact whatsoever in those forests.
Well, that's good to hear that it was caught before it was, spreading everywhere. For folks who have never heard of stiltgrass, why is this particular invasive grass a problem? How does it damage forests?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting scenario. So I like to use the analogy that this is very similar in many ways to crabgrass in your lawn. It's an annual grass that grows from seed every year and dies. But what's unique about this plant is it can grow in shaded environments and shaded conditions underneath forests and on edges of forests. And it produces a lot more biomass, and that biomass tends to climb on top of other vegetation and suppress it and dominate the understory. So you get mats of this annual grass. So we have data that clearly shows that the understory native plants and wildlife are impacted by having this new species that's not native to our system. But what's even more scary is that biomass that sits there, that mat of annual grass, dries out over winter, and it changes fire frequency, or more importantly, fire intensity. And so it can really cause some dramatic shifts in that ecosystem, potentially cause additional harm to nearby urban environments if it's invaded. And it even changes some of the stuff that's happening below ground and the nutrient relationships. So it's just really impactful. This has been present in southern part of the U.S. for decades. So we've kind of been on the alert for it for many years. But the best way to prevent this impact is to identify it right when it establishes and get rid of it before it spreads. And so that's kind of why we've been trying to promote that people look for this plant.
So just to clarify, it's new to Wisconsin, this invasive species, but it's been a big problem for other states for a while.
Correct. It's been in northern Illinois for several years. We got our first known infestation in the county of La Crosse in 2020, and that's being actively eradicated and is nearly eradicated by the Wisconsin DNR. So we thought we were stiltgrass free until this new report came in this summer. And that's when we started to alert people to keep a lookout.
Well, walk me through what stiltgrass looks like and some of the characteristics that people can identify it by.
I will walk you through this, but I want to say first off, if you're not a plant expert, this is, difficulty 11 out of a scale of 1 to 10. So it's really a hard plant to identify because all grasses look alike, and even trained botanists can struggle with this. I'll preface this by saying you really should look at some of our resources to help you with identification. We have videos and fact sheets. But essentially, what you're looking for is a low growing grass that has a relatively short leaf, and that leaf has a very distinct midrib that's white in the middle of it. And this grass, if it gets big enough, can actually grow on top of other vegetation, kind of like a vine.
Hmm.
If you look at the base of that annual grass, you will see roots that come out at nodes near the ground but above the ground. And those are kind of look like stilts, and that's where it gets its name, Japanese Stiltgrass.
And I understand that it also flowers. What does it look like when it flowers?
Yeah, I mean, so again, if you're not a trained botanist, it'll just look like any other grass. It actually is rather similar to crabgrass, but does have some unique characteristics. So it does not have a showy flower like we typically think of it. It more has a grass-like flower because it's wind pollinated. And actually, what makes this plant so aggressive, it produces flowers that don't need to be pollinated to produce seed. So it has a special type of flowers that it can produce that allows it to rapidly produce seeds. And so that's our goal with management. If we can prevent seed production, we can win this battle. And so when we're managing it, that's our goal. The good news is we're far enough north that it doesn't start to produce seed until middle of September. So we can still detect things now, get rid of it before seed is produced, and protect our forest from further spread.
So what I'm understanding is that Japanese stiltgrass is an annual invasive grass, not a perennial, and it dies in the fall and reproduces by seed. And that's how it grows again and again every year.
Correct.
Okay. So can this invasive species still be managed or removed after it flowers?
Yeah, so after it flowers, or when it is in the process of flowering, our techniques change. And we're usually using techniques where we're trying to collect the flowers so the seed doesn't go back into the soil. Once that seed's in the soil, we've lost that round of the battle. But usually what we're trying to do is that then we're going to alter our tactics and try to encourage that seed to germinate. And then when it germinates, we want to actively control it before it produces flowers and seeds the next year. And the good news is the seed does not persist very long in the soil. So some seeds can persist for over 20 years in the soil. Research has shown anywhere from 2 to 3 years is the seed longevity. So if you have an invaded forest, if you prevent seed production for 3 consecutive years, you should eradicate that population as long as no seed is coming into that environment from outside sources.
So as we've been talking about, when an invasive species is introduced to Wisconsin, do you look at how it got here?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to try and understand how it arrives. It's an easy question to ask, ex-grad. Unfortunately, it's a really hard to find the solution in many cases. And this is an example of this. We just showed up at this woodlot. We were told, we went there, this plant is there, and we have no idea how it got there. So we can come up with some guesses. Since this is spread by seeds, our guess is that some equipment or an individual came in with contaminated soil on their boots or on a piece of equipment like a tractor, and they did some work there. That seed got deposited and was allowed to take off and expand. So that's likely what happened, but in many cases, it can be almost impossible to figure that out. But that's important if we can, because then we can understand how to prevent future invasions.
Right. I was going to follow up with that with asking you, like, what are some ways that people can just help prevent any spread of invasive species?
There's 2 pieces of advice that are like really, really simple ones. Number 1, learn how to identify some of the common invasive species that are in areas that you visit, because knowledge of where they are will then make you aware of how they spread. And then the other probably more important thing is whenever you go to a site, when you're getting ready to leave that site, just take a moment to clean off any mud or debris on yourself, your vehicle, or your equipment before going to another location. Because what we find is 90+% of the time, it's accidental spread of these populations, not knowingly because it was contaminated in something else that was delivered. So those are probably the two easiest things to do. Again, easy to say, but if you're out, in a muddy field and you have mud all over your car, that can be a hard thing to do sometimes. But I would urge listeners to think about that, particularly when they're going to an area that is not invaded or heavily invaded when you previously were visiting an area that did have a lot of invasives.
Right. Just changing a little bit of those habits, that mindset. I'm Lake Effect's Excret Nunez speaking with Mark Renz about preventing the spread of Japanese stiltgrass. So earlier you mentioned the type of environment this invasive species thrives in. Is it limited to forest lands, or can people find this in their backyards too?
So they potentially could. So this plant is really unique and it's really well adapted to partial shade to full shade. So it does really, really well on edges of fields. In this one property in particular, it has some lawn areas that were mowed and it's well established within the lawn and is doing well because of the partial sun. So again, kind of like crabgrass. I don't think it's going to be a problem in full sun environments, but any partial sun environments, it could be a problem. I think the impacts are probably less in an urban setting, like say someone's backyard versus a forest, which we're trying to maintain in more of a natural system. But it could definitely get established and be a problem in those areas.
So if someone thinks they spot Japanese stiltgrass, what should they do?
Yeah, I think there's like 3 or 4 things to do. First is stop, take a picture of it, and send it to someone who's an expert that can confirm its identification. I think that's probably the most important thing that they can do. And it can be someone in Extension, someone with Wisconsin DNR, or even someone locally that can get it to one of us. Then the other thing to do is if you are on that property and you do think you have it, make sure you clean your equipment and yourself off before leaving that site so you're not spreading that site. Those are probably the top 2 things to do. What will happen if it is a positive response, you will get confirmation of that response, and then we will work with the landowner or the individual to develop a management plan so they can manage that plant. I want to emphasize that this is a prohibited plant in Wisconsin. So by law, it is a requirement that the landowner control this, or DNR has the authority to go in and control it and send them the bill. But DNR has been really good at trying to work with the landowner to try to mitigate this in a positive way and not be as forceful. So we're just trying to get the word out and make sure that people can get a handle on this. It sounds like we're seeing a new wave of invasion. We'll probably see more. So we're developing some tools to really prevent the impact of this species. That's really our goal.
Well, before we wrap up, you mentioned earlier that the first case of Japanese stiltgrass was confirmed in 2020. What's the status on eradicating that?
Yeah, so that was discovered by a botanist from another state that was familiar with this. Once that was discovered, there was some active surveying that went on by DNR, and now they're actively managing it. They've been managing it for 3 years. This is their 4th year. There were some challenges in the first steps on how to figure out the best approach, but every year they're seeing less and less plants. And so we're optimistic that that population is going to be eradicated soon.
And where can people go to find out more information about Japanese stiltgrass and other invasive species?
We actively create a lot of educational material slated at invasive plant identification as well as management. So we have several resources that you can find on our website, rensweedscience@cals.wisc.edu. We also have a group called Wisconsin's First Detectors Network. That's a group of community scientists that are trained, and then in lieu of the training, we ask that they go out and actively look for invasive species and submit observations. And so those are 2 good resources that are free that they can educate themselves on invasive species, how to identify them, how to manage them, what the impacts are, and even learn a little bit about our research that we're doing on them.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I appreciate you sharing this information on stiltgrass.
Great. Pleasure to communicate the information and happy to help.
Mark Renz is an extension weed specialist and a professor in the Department of Plant and Agroecosystem Sciences at UW-Madison. He spoke with Lake Effect's Excrement Nunez. This year, WUWM has committed to covering issues our listeners say are top priorities. That includes the economy. As part of that coverage, we're exploring how the economy is impacting Wisconsinites with different financial needs and concerns. WUWM's Maiyan Silver met George Kalinsis Jr. at a workforce development office on Milwaukee's South Side. He lives in Milwaukee and receives veterans benefits. After losing his retail management job a year ago, he finally landed a new job as a salt packer and started studying at MATC. Kalinsis Jr. joins Maiyan at a local McDonald's to talk about how the economy is impacting him now.
Can I get a large Diet Coke, please?
Do you feel like you're in a better situation now than you were a year ago?
I feel that I am in a better situation. I mean, not in a better situation. I'm in a situation where I'm keeping afloat, I would say. Not in a better situation. I was making more money before. I'm making a little bit less money than what I was, but the economy being the way that it is, I think that the tariffs have really, really affected the middle class. Less product is coming in. There's less stuff to work with, less material. More of the manufacturing, the blue-collar workers like myself and people that are in the middle class are really, really suffering right now.
So when you say you were working in retail, like what was that all about?
I was a manager both at Menards and at Kohl's, and that's what I was doing there.
And did you feel like firsthand the impacts of the tariffs? Like how did you observe that?
Yes, I applied for 125 jobs in the last 2.5 weeks. And the same time last year when I had applied for jobs, I had applied maybe for 25, 30, and I probably got 10, 15 callbacks out of those 25, 30. Out of the 125 jobs that I applied for this past few weeks, I got 3 responses.
And one of them was the salt packing job.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you feel like that has been impacted by tariffs in particular? Or is it the economy overall?
I think it's the economy overall. I just don't think that we have enough product coming into the country anymore because of the tariffs and what they are. And that is stopping production. That is, there's less product around to work with. And they're passing on those taxes to the consumer. The consumer's having to pay more money for stuff that, and inflation has gone up. That last year at this time wasn't the same price.
So do you feel like when you budget things, you're paying more for various things, whether it's groceries or rent or things like that?
Absolutely. My rent went up from $10.40 last year. It went up to $11.75 this year. That's a big jump in a year. And milk last year at Walmart was like $2.45. It's gone over $3 now. I mean, I know it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when you have a family and you're trying to work and you have children, every penny counts.
And what else is your situation? You had told me that you're a veteran. You were in the Army. You get Medicaid services at the VA. You receive a veteran's pension. You have a 70% disability rating. Have you been following what's going on with the VA in terms of mass layoffs or a shift towards privatization? Is that impacting you at all?
Absolutely. There was a lot of counselors that were around before for AODA stuff and for mental health. They have really, really cut back on the AODA and the mental health side of things. I know the program at the DOMS where they go for rehabilitation services, they have cut all the art programs, they have cut all the extracurricular programs, they've really, really stripped it down. And instead of getting 7 to 8 hours of programming where you really, really need it in rehab, they're done like 3 or 4 hours now. And there are a lot of teachers there that I knew that had left and taken the early retirement package or early tenure package, and some of them were just being forced out.
How do VA benefits affect you in your life? Like how do they impact you?
I couldn't live without them. I get 70%, which is $1,759. There's no way I could live without that money.
A month?
Yes, ma'am.
And they help pay for your medical treatment, for your AODA counseling, all that kind of stuff too, right?
Yes, ma'am, they do.
Are any shifts impacting you other than, maybe you're noticing there's fewer counseling appointments available or fewer hours or instructors available? Are you worried about your actual benefits as well?
I am worried about our actual benefits as well. I haven't started to cut any of those yet, but seeing as how it used to take a day or two to get an appointment to go and see a counselor or to go and see a therapist, now you're looking at 2 to 3 weeks out. And I think that that's a big, big impact, especially with the veteran needing the services that they do.
So you're feeling an impact on your ability to get care?
Yes, ma'am.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's directly related to the cuts from the federal government?
Absolutely, it's directly effective. They don't have the manpower that they used to anymore, and or the woman power that they used to anymore. There's just not enough people there to handle all the caseloads.
Is any of this impacting you directly, whether that's mentally, physically? Is this keeping you up at night? Are you worried about this?
It's directly affecting me mentally. I'm bipolar, and that's why I have my 70% disability connection rating for. And yes, it does make me rather upset at times, and it does make me worry. It does keep me up at night because not only for myself, but I worry about fellow veterans and what they're going through, and the men and women that have served this country and have paid the ultimate sacrifice. They should be taken care of, and it doesn't feel like they are right now.
How does it work? You have to work 30% of the time, or do you have to work part of the time?
No, you can work as much as you want on your disability rating. It's whatever you feel that you can handle.
I see. So what is your typical work week like now at your new job?
It's a straight 40-hour work week.
And so whatever you get through disability benefits supplements that?
Correct.
And how do you feel like you, do you feel like this job is going to be a long-term one, or what are you planning for in the future around that?
I'm hoping that this job can sustain me to get through school until I get my degree. So that's what my plan is right now, and I'm very, very thankful and happy that I have this job and I have this opportunity from the Cargill Company.
And you have a high school diploma?
I do.
And so you think that with a tech degree or with a degree from MATC that you'll be able to get a job in your chosen field?
I think the field that I chose is one of the reasons why I did choose it is because of the economy. I went into an industry that's recession-proof. I went into the funeral industry, so there's always a need. It's never up, it's never down, it's always steady.
So would you say right now that you have economic optimism or faith that you can make changes in your life that will sustain you?
Absolutely. I still feel that I can make changes in my life to sustain me. I can cut back on smoking. I can cut back on some of the extracurriculars, going out too much, and tighten the belt buckle up and get back to work and start saving some money again and crack the books and hope I get it done quicker.
Do you feel like when it comes to inflation that your behaviors are changing a little bit in terms of how you spend money, where you spend it?
Absolutely. I think you have to watch where you spend every dime right now because there's just so many things that are uncertain.
Do you, we're currently in a presidential administration that's been making a lot of changes to the federal government and to economic policy. Is that something you support? Would you have voted for it?
I think President Trump is doing a great job, especially with all of the other things that he has to take into account that are going on in the world. I think that he's doing the best job that he can, and it's the hardest job in the world to be the most powerful man in the world, and to have everybody always asking you for help and having to be involved in so many conflicts going on in the world. I think that he's doing the best job that he can. And yeah, I support some of the cuts that he's made to the federal government. I think that privatizing some of it will help, but I do think that some of the stuff that's going on with the veterans is, I don't think any of that stuff should be cut.
And if I remember correctly, you did not vote for him in 2024, but you consider yourself a Republican.
That's correct.
And was there a reason you didn't vote for him?
I was out of town when I was on vacation. That's why I didn't vote.
But you would have voted for him.
Yes, I would have.
And would you vote again if he could run in? He's not going to be able to run in 2028, but if he could?
I don't know. We'll see how the economy goes.
And what are you watching for in terms of the next few years?
The next few years, what I'm watching, the economy, growth of business, and to see where we stand with the national health care.
You're a fan of national health care?
I think that it's necessary because there's some families that just absolutely wouldn't be able to make it without it. How can a working mom that is single and working 2 or 3 jobs, especially working for minimum wage, how can she afford to pay for insurance as well and give those kids the same opportunities that the rest of the children have in the world?
And do you have to take care of kids?
No, thankfully not right now.
So you're thinking mostly for your economic well-being specifically?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. George Kalinsis Jr., thank you for speaking with us at WWM. We look forward to checking in with you every next few months to see how things are going.
Fantastic. I hope to see you guys again too.
That was George Kalinsis Jr. He's a Milwaukeean who receives veteran benefits. He spoke to WUWM's Maiyan Silver as part of our check-in series where we hear from Milwaukee voices on the changing economic landscape. At WUWM.com, you can find more of our coverage on economic issues concerning Wisconsinites. In about 15 minutes, we'll learn about the work of local paleteros, the street vendors who sell paletas or popsicles. But first, we'll get a preview of this year's Milwaukee Short Film Festival, coming up this weekend. That's coming up next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. The Milwaukee International Short Film Festival is the longest-running film festival that honors local filmmakers. This year, all but 4 films are premieres, never seen in the area before, and 90% of the films are by local filmmakers, with shorts that celebrate everything from comedy to horror and local filmmakers of color. There's plenty to see during the festival. This year, they're also sponsoring the 3rd annual Milwaukee Illuminate Film Festival, an underground intersectional festival happening on Sunday. To share more about the programming, Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski is joined by Milwaukee Short Film Festival founder and director, Ross Bigley, as well as Amber Rose McNeil, the co-founder and volunteer festival director for the Milwaukee Illuminate Film Festival. Bigley begins by explaining how he chooses the film he features in the fest.
There are 5 blocks that I programmed this year. Amber programmed 2 with her film festival. And there are different sort of ways I look at it. Because we are on Friday and Saturday, I tend to try to get the blocks to build so that Friday there are good films, but Saturday it keeps building forward till the end of the festival. And hopefully you get a sense that you're seeing a continuation of something building up to a finale. That's how I like to look at it that way.
Yeah, and to go into the lineup a little more, I understand all but 4 films are premieres, which is great. And obviously a ton of it is done by local filmmakers as well, right?
Yes. This year we have so many films, like 95 or 97% of the films are premieres. And they're either world premieres, which there are quite a few local films that are world premieres. There are Midwest premieres, Wisconsin premieres, meaning they haven't been shown in Wisconsin. Or there are Milwaukee films that they might have shown up north, but they haven't shown down in the southern region of Wisconsin. And the southern region of Wisconsin has so many film festivals, and that's kind of important to kind of differentiate too, because up north You got Oshkosh, you got Waiwiga, you got a couple others. Here, there's at least 10, 11, maybe 12 film festivals in the southern part of Wisconsin. So it's a little more difficult to have a film premiere down south in Wisconsin than it is up north.
Right. And another component that I think kind of dovetails into that, but you also incorporated what you're calling a film challenge this year for the first time. Can you share what that is and why you felt the need for a specific goal for a filmmaker to achieve?
Well, I sort of was batting around ideas before the actual planning of the festival. And one of those ideas I had was doing a film contest of some sort. I talked with Michael Kenny a little bit of the 48 here in Wisconsin and try to get some ideas going with him and seeing how we can connect with the 48 and maybe do another challenge like the winners of the 48 would then make a film for the festival or whatever. But I just went a totally different route and decided that, sometimes the films at the 48 are good and well-made films, but a lot of times the directors go back because they're rushing and trying to make something for 48 hours that they go back afterwards and fine-tune it or remix the sound more or add a shot or two. And they call that the director's cut then. And I figured, why don't I just make it a week? That gives them enough time to polish a film so that when we screen it, it's the best work that they could do in a week than instead of the best work they can do in 2 days.
Right.
And the minute I posted that, we filled up the slots immediately. And how it works is there's 5 films. I have 5 blocks. Each of the 7-day challenge films is the first film in each block. And they are judged by separate people. And they're also judged by the main festival judges as well. So they're up for 2 different sets of awards.
Now, Russ, as you said, there's blocks Friday, Saturday, and Amber Rose to bring you in Sunday. Part of this weekend's festival is a day dedicated to the Milwaukee Illuminate Film Festival, which you're the director of. So can you share more about the type of filmmakers that you dedicate your programming to and a little bit of background on MIF itself?
Yeah, so MIF is exclusively for underrepresented filmmakers. So filmmakers from marginalized communities, whether that be people of color, queer people, trans people, also survivors of sexual violence, fat filmmakers, neurodivergent filmmakers. We basically have been, over the last 3 years, trying to create a space that's not just about screening films, but is also about building community for filmmakers that are often left out of kind of your average film festival.
As you mentioned, it's just 3 years in the making. So can you share a bit more insight about what yourself and other filmmakers involved? You mentioned finding more community, but when it comes to even production support or working together, what kind of goal are you fostering outside of obviously a great thing for audiences to see, which is the product of all these filmmakers?
Yeah, so in Milwaukee, it can be sort of difficult to find your film community. A lot of people find it if they go through UWM, the film program there, but not everybody does. Some people are from, we have a filmmaker from Sheboygan. We have some films from Chicago. It's just kind of about getting people together and having a space to also talk about their art and network as well as just watching the films.
I love that. And can both of you share how this partnership came together? I understand you screened different places the past 2 years, right? And this is the first year you'll be as a part of the blocking for the Short Film Fest?
Yes.
I'll let Amber take over on that answer there. It's her festival.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. So we ran it for 2 years more as kind of your standard business model. And we were hoping that we could continue that way, but I ended up getting a job teaching and could no longer do that. So we sort of had to close down / put the festival on pause to see what we could do. And when I let Ross know about that, Ross was like, oh, well, would you like a day? I would hate to see, the festival that you've built kind of like disappear because, you know, Ross is also very committed to intersectionality and inclusion in his programming and his festival. So it was really lovely to be basically given a guest spot so that MIF can, you know, survive another year while we're kind of like seeing what's happening as we closed it down as a business, and so it's just entirely volunteer this year, and we're also donating all of our proceeds to local organizations as well.
That's awesome. And I feel like what you do and Ross, the work you do, really highlights what values that filmmakers have for one another and for the community. How do you feel like the Short Film Festival is like one of the best ways to show off not just local filmmakers, but what makes the Milwaukee scene so special?
I would say that we've always tried. When we began the festival, it was always spotlight on Milwaukee filmmakers and just anyone in the surrounding area. And some years we didn't get as many Milwaukee films than others, but in the last 7-8 years, that's changed dramatically. That's most of what we get now is Milwaukee filmmakers or Wisconsin filmmakers sending us stuff. And they luckily prefer our festival to be the first stop instead of the last stop now. And the way we kind of position ourselves in the calendar and where other festivals are, we can be the first stop to see a lot of these films. Because festival season kind of begins like right now and it ends in the spring. And so it's a lucky thing that we've kind of positioned ourselves and all the wheels fell right in the right place for us to keep going doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. And with 3 days and 75 films showing over the course of those 3 days, as someone coming in, it can be hard to know like where to start. Maybe you look at a general theme or something like that. But for both of you, Ross and Amber Rose, are there any films or filmmakers you want to like give a shout out or that's on your mind of, hey, this is a good place to start that might help some viewers dip their toe into a short film festival in case they haven't already?
With me, a good place to start is maybe looking at some of the new films from past filmmakers. Because people who've been at our festival before and you might have seen those films will go, okay, I might look at this person's new work to give it a chance. Like Carlos Seguia, I hope I pronounced this name right, a Brazilian director. He won a few years ago honorary mention Best Director for Big Bang. And it was a great film. And he came back with a new film this year. And I think it's one of the best films in the festival. And it's Friday night, 6 o'clock block. And I think a lot of people will be really impressed with it. It's a different type of film. It's slower paced. And a lot of people are a little off by that rhythm today with how everything is cut and edited and all that. But it's a wonderful film. I tend to not program my tastes. I try to think what would be good for an audience, but there's one film I thought was really hilarious, and it's probably the only film I kind of programmed with my taste in there, and that's Three Chicken Dinners. I thought it was really funny and well done.
And Amber Rose, any films or filmmakers you want to highlight for the MIF section on Sunday as well?
Yeah, so we have 2 blocks. The first short block that starts at 3:30 is Lavender Constellations, which is sort of a little bit more sapphic leaning. Not entirely. I like to keep like a good kind of like flow dynamic through the blocks. A really good film that's kind of like the final for that block, because I wanted to kind of energize people to come to the second block, is a Canadian film called My Gay Demon Girlfriend, which is a comedy film, which is kind of like cute and funny and queer. We don't usually program a lot of comedy, but when I saw it, I fell in love with it straight away. Yeah. And our second block is Late Night Mother, which is kind of like more late night films. There's a really great film called Mother, which is a Nigerian film. Which deals with kind of like mental health and cultural aspects of motherhood in Nigeria. So that's like a really exciting film in Late Night Mother.
One of my favorite things about film fests, and especially short film fests, is that there's just a wealth of perspectives, of different formats for everyone to dive into. So Ross and Amber Rose, thank you both so much for joining me today to give us a little more insight into what people can expect this weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Ross Bigley is the founder and director of the Milwaukee Short Film Festival. Amber Rose McNeil is the co-founder and volunteer festival director, as well as the lead programmer for the Milwaukee Illuminate Film Festival. They both spoke with Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski. The Milwaukee Short Film Festival will be held at the Avalon Theater September 5th through the 7th. You can find more information on each day's programming at WUWM.com. Milwaukee Film is a financial contributor to WUWM. And did you know you can listen to Lake Effect as a podcast? Search for Lake Effect wherever you get your podcasts to download and listen on demand. Coming up next, a local artist shares her love of paleteros and explores what the job takes. Keep listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. There may be no more of an iconic sound on the south side of Milwaukee than the bells from a paleteros cart. Those are the street vendors who sell paletas, or popsicles. But have you ever wondered what the job is like, and who does it? Here's the story of one of the vendors told by local artist Paula Lovo, who has a lifelong love of paleteros.
Hay de arroz, coco, fresa de leche.
I'm 10 years old, and my siblings to follow, 9, 8, and 4. And we hear the paletero from afar, and we perk up, looking for abuelito to get us a paleta for that hot summer day.
Limón, coco, fresa y queso.
The Southside and paleteros are inseparable. My name is Paula, a filmmaker and educator from Milwaukee. Maybe one reason I love them so much is that they've always reminded me of my abuelito. Viejito with a little wry smile, aged from the sun, and sometimes a sombrero. But I've always wondered, who are the people who do this job? How did they get to Milwaukee? And maybe most importantly, are they safe?
Las paletas, boles. ¿De qué sabor? Hay de arroz, coco, fresa, chicle, limón. ¿De coco?
This is Donato. He's clean-shaven, with a long-sleeve shirt, ready for a full day walking in the sun. And the first thing I noticed about him was his very reserved energy.
Ahorita estamos en entrevista, por eso. Ajá. Dale, gracias a ustedes. Muchas gracias.
I'm sharing Donato's story because as a filmmaker, I'm all about archiving. And lately, after moving back to the South Side, and the first house I ever lived in, I've thought about how we archive stories of those around us that aren't often heard from. Because as present as paleteros are, they're also largely unseen.
Sí, está bien bonito acá. Está tranquilo. Sí, está tranquilo.
Before Donato came to Milwaukee a few years ago, he lived all over the U.S.
Estuvo Los Ángeles, estado de Utah, en Tennessee.
He says he likes it in Milwaukee, but thinks he speaks Spanish too quickly.
No habla muy rápido el español. Yo no hablo muy rápido español. Es que yo me dedico a puros mi idioma de allá.
So I relate. There was times where I would confuse dia feriada with dia rifada, all to just say it's a day off. One place where I could practice my Spanish was with my paletero. ¿Me da una de limón o de fresa si no tiene? He never judged. Well, maybe he did, but I didn't know. For Donato, his first language is Mije, the indigenous language from Oaxaca, where he's originally from.
Sí, mi niña, pues, mi niña, ya tiene ahorita 24 años. Sí, ya, gracias a Dios ya tiene su trabajito, ya tiene todo, pero te agradezco, el Dios, ahí está el Dios.
¿Y tiene más hijos o es
Hay otro chamaco, apenas va a agarrar
He shared with me that he has 2 kids. His daughter is 24 and she's an engineer. His son is 17 and studying to become an architect. When we took a short break, he called his wife. He talks to her every day on his route. So at this point, we've been out for a few hours, walking the streets. I was getting tired, trying to keep up with his pace and carrying my camera. But he wasn't slowing down. And he was pushing his carrito, which I found out weighs up to 150 pounds.
Ahora sí, yo voy a agarrar por calle, mira. Yo voy bajando así, y voy subiendo otra vez. Cuando me voy así, me regreso otra vez así y ya acabó el día. A las 9:10 y 9:15 son todos los días. Y cuando está mal el tiempo, yo me descanso.
Donato starts his days around 9 a.m. Every day of the week, walking and selling the whole time until his carrito is basically empty. Some days are 8 hours, some are 12 or longer. When we were first out there together, it felt like a lot of wandering around. But Donato knew exactly where he was going and when. He knew about the Sunday soccer games at Burnham Park. He knows that a little after noon, he needs to get to the mechanics on 38th Street, who he calls his regulars.
Yo voy a la fábrica, una fábrica. Allí en la 53 Burnham, ahí está ¿cómo se llama? La agencia. Yo voy allí. Ahorita me dijeron, cuando yo me salí, yo pedí permiso, son 5 meses o 6 meses. Yo pedí permiso, pero ahorita voy a ir. Cuando está mal tiempo, yo voy a ir a trabajar.
This has been a rough season to work outside. Oppressive heat, horrible air quality, and of course, all the rain. When that happens, Donato can find warehouse work. When it's not paleta season, he's got a factory job.
Allí estivando todas partes. Sí.
Sometimes I see paleteros in the park looking completely exhausted. And this is when I had my oh snap moment. I've romanticized this work. I've romanticized the lives of my paleteros. Because besides being hard work, I know it can be dangerous work. If you're in Milwaukee, you know some of the history. You might have heard of the vendor Emilio Garza being robbed and killed 5 years ago, or the peletero that was assaulted last Cinco de Mayo. Most incidents aren't reported, including when Donato was robbed at gunpoint last year.
Me robaron. Ahí está un señor, me compraron allí paletas, bolis, me pidió allí, sí me pagó el otro señor. El otro, de repente llegó la camioneta, eran 6 personas allí adentro. Me llamaron uno, me dijeron que quieren paletas, me llamaron, ven para acá.
Donato was making a sale and these men start coming out of the car. They held him at gunpoint and searched him and the car and found all his single bills. By this point, Donato is seasoned enough to know to hide the 5, 10s, and 20s in a different secret location.
Busca acá en mi bolsa, no hay nada.
But that's not all he's concerned about today. Like if ICE were to come for him, what can he do?
Mira, ahorita no sé qué voy a hacer, pues. Como no tengo papeles, no tengo nada, ¿cómo voy a hacer? Y ya me agarran y ya me voy a mi país. Pues así estoy pensando. No hay otra oportunidad. ¿Cómo voy a hacer? ¿Qué hago? Nada. Sí. Así es.
When I got connected with Donato, I was told he doesn't talk very much, but he's really good at his job and should be able to tell me all about the work. But maybe he just hasn't been asked the right questions. So let's recall back to 10-year-old Paula. I had my paleta de fresa because they didn't have the limon. And I turn and look at my brother with his stained blue lips and laugh, only to find out I spilled my own paleta on my shirt. Everything was carefree, that's what I remember. That's how I felt growing up with my paletero. Even while they were walking tens of miles, pushing their carrito, leaving work exhausted to homes without dinner, without their loved ones, getting ready to do it all again the next day.
Así es. Estoy contento ahorita, cuando tengo mi trabajo, tengo algo para comer, estoy contento ahorita. Sí. Hola, buenas tardes. Hay paletas, boles, chicharrones. Órale.
That was a local paletero Donato and Milwaukee artist Paula Lovo. That story was produced by WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Joy Powers. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, the new director of the Circus World Museum in Baraboo, Wisconsin, shares what the future holds for this historic site. Thanks so much for joining us right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.